everyone. My name is Sasha Ong, and I am your host for today. Welcome to the Workplace Communications in 2022 Out of Control webinar. Today, we are pleased to have Mr. Dutch Ng, Chairman of EGITA Cybersecurity Chapter, to deliver the welcome address. Subsequently, we will have a panel discussion with both Mr. Loy Chi Leng, Regional Vice President for Asia Pacific and Middle East in NetSphere, and Mr. Harsh McDane, Vice President for Product Management in NetSphere. They will share with us the data privacy and security issues which have emerged from increased remote working and the best practices which companies can learn to protect their businesses from data privacy and security breaches. So a gentle reminder, please feel free to comment in the Q&A box. We will address the Q&A during the panel discussion. Also, there will be a poll during the webinar, and there are $10 GrabFood vouchers to be won by the first 100 respondents. If you are interested to win the vouchers, we strongly encourage you to respond to the poll. Please also take note that you will be giving consent for NetSphere to reach out to you after the webinar should you choose to respond to the poll questions. So without further ado, I would like to begin the webinar by inviting Mr. Dutch Ng to deliver the welcome address. Mr. Ng, please.
Welcome. Hi, good morning to all. It's great to see you all, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to learn more about workspace communication in 2022 Out of Control. I'm Dutch, the chairman of EGITA Cybersecurity Chapter. My full-time role is a CEO and a co-founder of iSprint Innovation. As a result of COVID-19, organization has shifted to remote working due to public health and safety concerns. The transition to remote working has elevated privacy and security risks for the organization, multiplying cyber threats and data breaches. Organizations are now evaluating how well their technology infrastructure, including collaboration platform, can support their remote workforce in the new workplace environment. In this session, our speaker from NetSphere will share with you the data privacy and security issue that will come along with remote working as a new normal. This will also talk about the best practices company can adopt to protect your organization. So to all my old friends and existing member of EGITA, it's nice to have you with us again. To our new friends, I'm familiar with what EGITA does. Let me give you a very brief introduction. EGITA is a premium trade association set up by represent and champion the interests of the tech industry in Singapore. Within rapid evolving technology landscape, EGITA strives to create an ecosystem that anticipates trends and develop sustainable initiatives to strengthen and grow the industry. Currently, we have more than 900 members, ranging from innovative startups, vibrant small and medium-small size enterprises, to top MNCs, whom we are representing and articulating any technology industry concerns to relevant authority and stakeholder. EGITA strives to create an ecosystem that will strengthen the community and help the ICT industry to grow. EGITA strives as active voice for the tech industry by actively and responsibly advocating for change while remaining a trust and respected partner of the government. EGITA contributes to tech industry growth and transformation through national programs and initiatives that drive and enhance the Singapore economy. There are three key main roles that what we do: a business enabler, a neutral platform and aggregator for the tech industry to have various platforms that create opportunity for our members. A responsible voice. We run sessions and various government industry to provide feedback and get suggestions on how to help the industry. As an industry insight, we provide knowledge and intel on updates and news so that members will be more aware of the rapid changes and adapt it quickly. To coordinate the needs of subsector within the ICT space, we have formed industry chapters and committees to support strategic and emerging sector. We have classified our chapters into tech verticals and non-tech horizontal. Under the tech verticals, we have AI, high-performance computing chapter, cloud and data, cybersecurity, and for the non-tech horizontal, we have digital transformation chapter, Singapore enterprise, and smart nation. Companies that join EGITA as a member can choose which chapter they prefer to be involved in. Each chapter will plan activities, initiatives to engage their chapter members and the industry. We also spin off committees that cater to emerging industry needs. For example, 123 Jumpstart Committee cater to the young startup companies. Gaming and education technology are gaining traction today. We have also formed these two committees to cater for the needs. Other committees are blockchain committees, data center, data protection, government procurement, SME Go Digital, sustainability, talent and capability. New chapters and committees will be launched in response to the technology industry continue to grow and needs. If you would like to know more about EGITA, please write to the EGITA Secretariat at membership@egitech.org.sg. I also like to thank our partners, NetSphere, SBF, Singapore Business Federation, and SMF, Singapore Manufacturing Federation, for supporting this webinar. I hope that you will find the information useful for your organization. I wish you a fruitful webinar ahead. Thank you. And over to you, Sasha.
Thank you, Dutch, for delivering the welcome address. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Loy Chi Leng to share with us how companies can communicate effectively while protecting their data and systems. Mr. Loy, please.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Can you all see my screen as well?
We can see your screen.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's session on Workplace Communication 2022 Out of Control. I'm pretty sure that majority of us are working from home today. And so we want to talk about the risks, the security risks, the data privacy issues that we are all facing as a company, right, when we are working from home. Just before I start, let me just introduce myself. I'm Loy. I represent a company called NetSphere. We are actually ex-Motorola based in USA. We provide messaging solutions, services to carriers around the world, to governments, to enterprises around the world. The company focuses on messaging platforms. And so today, we are going to talk about workplace communications. This is based on our experiences in deploying many solutions the last two years, especially during this pandemic period, in this remote working environment. So the sessions today, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to focus on how the increase in remote working due to this pandemic, right, has elevated privacy and security risks, multiplying cyber threats and data breaches in workplace communications. So what must a company do when implementing an effective workplace communications platform to ensure productivity of the company are not impacted due to remote working? What must you do to make sure that your workplace communications are not getting out of control? We hope to share with you some key considerations and also detailed requirements in this session today so that your organization have a guide, a roadmap to ensure effective and secure workplace communications. My presentation will then follow by a Q&A panel discussion where my colleague, Mr. Harsh Mangim, who is actually calling from Chicago, he will join us in sharing his insights as well. So without further delay, let me jump right into what do we mean by workplace communication. Let's start off with a common understanding. Workplace communication is the process of exchanging information and ideas between the employees within an organization. It can be one-to-one, one-to-many, or even many-to-many. I believe all of us agree that an effective workplace is an integral part of a company's success. And the ability to communicate with one another effectively in the workplace can increase overall productivity and create a strong team. So companies actually invest a lot to ensure that proper channels of communication are set up to facilitate this exchange of information and ideas in their physical location. But of course, COVID-19, right, has changed the situation, changed the work environment, and also changed the way we communicate with one another, right? So let's take a look at some Singapore facts first to establish what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic period in Singapore. Okay, so I've got to jump right in here. Now, so in May 2020, Straits Times reported 90% of the employees surveyed want to work from home even after the circuit breaker period. 90%. Our Minister of Trade and Industry, Mr. Gam Kin Yong, said on 10 June 2021, right, that employers should exercise flexibility by allowing their workers to work from home, if possible. So we may say that in this in the post-COVID-19 era, employees are expecting that they will continue to have the flexibility, ability to work from home anywhere, at any time, on any devices, even as they have to return to the office. So this hybrid mode of working is here to stay. Remote working is not going to go away. So with all this remote working and hybrid mode, so what's the impact on remote working on workplace communication? Let's take a look at some interesting facts. In this picture down here, it's actually from Gartner. As you can see here, what's happening here is that the acceleration of remote working has actually had real impact on workplace communication. As shown in the figure, the traditional office, right? Traditional office, you move where you have your desk phones, your core networks, your local tools, and physical live collaboration. Is now very different from what we see here in the remote work environment, where mobility is important, where services are going to the cloud, where you need sufficient home broadband, mobile broadband as well. And more importantly, right, from moving from desk phones, live collaboration, we are moving onto an online tool and collaboration environment. So in Singapore, we have sufficient home broadband, right? Because it's not an issue because with our fiber broadband penetration. We also have sufficient mobile broadband because we have higher 5G adoption. And of course, with high smartphone penetration, access to sufficient mobile broadband is also not a challenge in Singapore as well. Therefore, setting your workers, right, to work from home from the bandwidth perspective is not an issue in Singapore. But what about organization? What do they face now when they want to help their workers to be more engaged with one another when they are not in the office? So they have to move to online tools and collaborations means to ensure the engagement continues. So due to this increase in mobility and also to move to the online tools and collaboration, IT organization also needs to manage now multiple personal devices accessing the network because employees are using all these personal devices to communicate with one another during remote working. So this acceleration of remote work actually has shifted the workplace communication to another level, right? With this shift, what's happening right now in Singapore? In a recent Cisco remote working report issued last year, the results of their survey from Singapore is very interesting. 76% of the companies surveyed that top 3 IT solutions, right? One of the top 3 IT solutions are actually collaboration tools that are deployed during this remote work. 76%. And 75% talks about the importance of deploying, adopting cybersecurity measures to ensure remote work is safe. And on top of that, the IT also recognize the challenges to manage personal devices. 56% of the company face tremendous challenges in managing and protecting their personal devices. And so we are seeing more work is being done on the personal mobile devices of the employees. This is the #1 challenge right now for IT organization. So when your employees are using personal devices in a workplace communication, do we know how they are using and what are they using? Let me show you another interesting results, another interesting survey done recently. This is a survey done by Pew Research back in 2015 and followed by 2018 and then by MEF in 2020. What you can see here is that the top application used on mobile devices today, right, are mobile messaging, voice and video calls. These are the most popular right now. What does this mean? This means that the remote workers are also communicating and collaborating with one another using these applications on their phone. Your workers are actually exchanging ideas, information through these platforms more than email, as you can see here. Email is #4 right now on their personal devices. So the next question is, right, with all this mobile messaging and voice video calls, what exactly are they using to communicate with one another and to collaborate with one another? So that's the thing that we want to turn on to on the next chart. On workplace communication, data privacy and security impact. Oven Research and 451 Research review an alarming picture here. You can see what's going on here. 85% of the employees surveyed in various companies back in 2017, then 2019 and 2020, employees are using consumer mobile messaging apps for business collaborations and communications. 85%. So this has real impact on the security and data privacy issues. This pose real-time threats to your company assets and network. You will face IP and data security issues. You will face data privacy issues, as I mentioned earlier. And IT is having nightmare controlling, right, how your employees are actually using their applications to access work data. And of course, you have non-compliance issues as well. They are not complying with regulatory requirements and certainly not complying with many company policies as well. So the COVID-19 situation has accelerated and compounded the threat to data privacy and security breaches all over the world. And in Singapore, it's the same thing as well. As you have seen earlier, the data from Singapore, the research and the survey from Singapore is very similar to the rest of the world. So how is it that this whole thing is getting out of control? We just need to take a look at some of the news, right, report that's coming out all over the world. How all these consumer communication applications, workplace communications, right, are posing real-time data concerns over the world. Let me show you 3 examples here from the news report. WhatsApp gives a user an ultimatum that they have to share Facebook data with Facebook or stop using the app. That's not a good thing, right? And what about Telegram? I know many of us have turned to Telegram because of what's happening to WhatsApp privacy and data policies. But there's an alleged link, right, based on this report between Telegram and Kremlin. What is it Telegram is telling us, right, about its connection to Kremlin? Is that a concern for many companies? Yes, it is. And at the bottom here, you can see the BBC News, right? The report about WeChat and the Chinese government, right? So these are really examples of concerns surfacing, right, with all this use of consumer application. Now, in 2021 and 2022, we're going to see more news like that popping up, right? In 2021, in this year alone, Zuckerberg defends WhatsApp privacy change, right? Apple new iMessage privacy updates, right? How Zuckerberg and the Apple, and the Facebook, they are not happy with this new privacy policies Apple is adopting in all their devices. WhatsApp dropped by Erdogan, all right, after Facebook privacy, right? There are more things that happened during this year. WhatsApp responds to privacy backlash. So you get the picture here that all these things are happening and creating huge concerns for companies. And if you look at this last slide here, Forbes, about a month ago, talks about why you should quit WhatsApp as critical new updates confirmed. And in Wired magazines, right, in the article in January 27, why fleeing WhatsApp for better privacy? They say that don't turn to Telegram, right? So can a company ignore real-time threats by your user, employees, using consumer applications and collaboration tools, right, as workplace communication tools? I believe all of you will say no. But so at this point, what I want to do is actually to conduct a poll to get a feel of how all of us respond to the use of consumer messaging and collaboration tools, right, as our workplace communication tool, right? So we have two questions here. This polling, I believe that you can respond the poll in the Zoom box. We have two questions for our attendees here. I'm pleased to share, as I mentioned earlier, the first 100 responded to these two questions, right, will get a $10 Grab food voucher each. I hope this will help you when you're working from home and feeling hungry. So all you need to do is respond to the two questions in the poll in the Zoom box, and we will send the Grab food voucher coupons, right, to your email. The question is very simple to answer. It's just a yes or no to each question. So the first question is, does your company believe the use of workplace communications and collaboration tools, right, has become more important during this COVID-19 pandemic? The question two is, does your company ban the use of consumer messaging and communication platforms such as WhatsApp and WeChat for official communications? Yes or no to these questions. If you answer yes, that your company bans use of WhatsApp, congratulations, right? You are a step further in ensuring your data privacy and data security. And if no, right, I will strongly recommend your company to reconsider to deploy some secure workplace communication tools for your remote users. Now, given all this threat to workplace communications due to the use of consumer messaging platform, what are the key considerations for the organization to implement? What are the key requirements that you need to do, right, to implement secure workplace communication solutions? All right. So before I jump to the next slide, please continue. We will leave the poll on until the end of the presentation. I hope you will actually provide your answers. And if you're Singaporean, right, especially as Singaporean working from home, because the Grab food voucher is actually for Singaporeans, all right? Now, so what are the key considerations for, sorry, let me just go on to, okay. Key considerations are to implement a secure workplace platform in this remote working environment. There are actually 4 considerations, 4 principles companies should be focusing on. The number 1 is this, security, right? Is the solution secure? Please note that we are not considering security from we are considering security from a workplace communication perspective. We are not going to dwell on things like secure access, securing endpoints today. These are all important policies, right? The use of VPN, DNS, web control, right? Acceptable use policies and multi-factor authentication. These are important policies to adopt for your remote workers. But from a workplace communications point of view, when we talk about security, we are really talking about end-to-end or device-to-device encryption. The solution has to provide industry-leading security algorithm, right? Supporting end-to-end and device-to-device encryption. Your messages, right, on your communication platform has to be stored securely in the cloud or the on-prem. It can be documents that you share with one another, data you share with one another. This has to be securely stored in the cloud or on-prem or in your public cloud. Now, the second consideration is control. The organization must have some form of control for or visibility of the remote workers due to the use of workplace communications, especially they are outside the company network. IT, for example, must have a centralized admin control panel where they can actually scan and look at the end users and how they are using their workplace communication tools. And so IT have to have this admin control so that they can also effectively impose policies on the remote users as well. Now, so the organization should have the ability to mandate different levels of privileges for different users as well. And certainly some other functions, control functions like the ability to remote wipe data of user data, and even screen capture, right? Alarms, right, to be set out when the users are doing screen capture on their phones on important data. These are important things that IT must be able to exercise, right, when controlling their end user when they are outside the company environment. The third thing is actually compliance, right? It's the solution, right? Is the solution complying to some of the key requirements, right, in the local context? Privacy laws, data protection, regulatory requirements, and company policies. Now, compliance is only possible, I think, in a certain sense, when you have certain control so that you can actually impose admin and physical and technical safeguards, right? So that the end users will be complying with some of these regulatory requirements. Now, the fourth consideration, all right, is actually very important. That's what we have been talking about collaboration, especially during this pandemic and remote working environment. How do you make sure that your employees continue to engage with one another? So collaboration, so when we talk about collaboration in a workplace communication, the tool must be able to extend, right, immediacy, contextual benefits of mobile messaging with HD voice, audio, screen sharing, and guest users to remote users, right? And because of the penetration and the use of mobile devices now, it's very important the collaboration tools is user-friendly, right? And on top of that, to ensure greater collaboration, the tool must be able to integrate with your business applications so that you can actually empower your business application with collaboration and capabilities. So when you have all these four considerations, right, these are the four important principles for a start for any companies to consider what they need to do, right, when they start to think about workplace communication tools for their remote users. Let's break this down into further requirements. From these four considerations, we'll go into the details right now. So, but before I jump into this table, right, which is provided by 451 Research, right, where they talk about market requirements for secure enterprise messaging and collaboration. This was actually a report provided end of last year in December 2020. Now, but before we jump into this table, 451 Research actually defined three categories of workplace communication. The number one is actually what we see here is the OTT consumer applications, right? We are all very familiar with this because 85% of our employees are using OTT consumer applications right now. Then you have what you call the unified comms as a service, right? These are your traditional desktop unified comms vendors, which have moved to the mobile space and into the cloud, all right? Then, of course, you have the third category, right? Where the vendors will provide secure messaging and collaboration, right? Including voice and video. Very focused on specific verticals and use cases with very strict security and compliance requirements. So these are the three categories. So when we look at the four principles and how we are breaking down to the various items here, data sharing is very important in terms of we must ensure our vendors, our tools, our communication platform does not collect any data at all. And this also means that our organization must not share any data with the solution providers. As you can see here, the OTT vendors, right, OTT consumer apps, they actually want your private data. In the case of WhatsApp, this includes your device ID, phone number, purchase history, location, and contacts, right? For Facebook Messenger, this includes purchase history, financial information as well, location, context, user content, identifier, user data, and diagnostic. So Facebook collects a lot more than WhatsApp. But on the UC space, it varies by vendor, right? But I think the important thing is we have to make sure the vendor does not collect any data at all, including metadata. This is really important because many vendors out there in the UC space actually does collect the data. So it's important to recognize that. Now, the second item to focus on security is really on encryption. So on OTT apps, all the three categories talks about end-to-end encryption. Zoom started their end-to-end encryption back in October 2020. And of course, we have end-to-end encryption, especially for the secure messaging and collaboration category. Now, the key question is not about end-to-end encryption. The key question to ask when you select a solution for workplace communication is, do they actually decrypt, right, your data in their cloud server for data mining? All right, let me repeat again. Do they actually decrypt your data at rest in their cloud server for data mining? And is this provider really doing end-to-end, or they are decrypting your data for whatever purpose? This is a key question to ask, right, on top of the end-to-end encryption when selecting a solution for workplace communication. Now, of course, we talked about compliance earlier, but let's go into the details. On OTT application, when your users are using consumer application, there's zero compliance, okay? And in terms of compliance, what we want to talk about is really compliance to standards like requirements like GDPR, HIPAA. In Singapore, we talk about PDPA, right, which is a very important compliance requirement for many organizations. So in the UC space, it varies by vendor. Some will say that they are compliant, some will say they are not, right? And then, of course, there are other certificates as well on top of the GDPR, HIPAA, or PDPA. There are other certificates such as the ISO 27001 or ISO 27701, right? That provides indication how serious your provider, your workplace communication vendors look at data privacy and security. So it is important, right, to provide, to ask your vendor to provide such certifications when considering them as a workplace communication provider. We talk about admin control, right? Obviously, OTT application does not provide you the admin controls. UC space and of course the secure messaging collaboration does provide that as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have visibility on your end user, on your remote workers, it's very difficult to ensure compliance. And again, do you have additional tools, right, to ensure compliance? For example, the ability to remote wipe the remote workers' applications data. Can you enforce certain types of files to be shared by your workers? Can you ensure that only certain people, certain workers can send certain messages, certain broadcasts? So this is what admin control is all about. Agile collaboration, we talk about it on OTT as a workplace communication tool. It's not applicable because they don't provide. But on the UC space, right, and the secure messaging and collaboration space, they do provide HD audios, video, screen sharing, guest access, and of course integration with the managed APIs as well. Now, the last question, requirement is actually mobility. This is not something that we tend to think about when we select a workplace communications tool. The reason is because we assume that, hey, they have a mobile app, so what's the problem, right? But it's important to ask, where did they start? How did they start their development of the application? For OTT, we know that it's mobile first, mobile architect and mobile only. So for example, WhatsApp here, right? They started from mobile architecture, but for the UC space, right, typically they started from the desktop and now they are moving into the cloud and especially in the mobile space. So the space itself, the vendors itself, right, when they started building their mobile app, it's more like an afterthought, right, from their desktop point of view, right? Whereas from the security, messaging, and collaboration providers, they started from mobile first. So that means the architecture is based on mobile design. So it will work well with your mobile devices. They will have mobile security as part of their important requirements as they develop the solution. And of course, it's also important to ask, the solution multi-platform as well? Can they work on all the different OS, mobile OS as well? So we believe these are important requirements based on the 4 principles we shared earlier, right? So what does this, so when we look at 2022, right, and beyond, is the workplace communication getting out of control? It can be getting out of control if we don't act now, right? So we believe the future of work is a dynamic and hybrid environment with many remote workers. So whatever workplace communication tools you choose must bridge the enterprise requirement with your desired business outcomes, right? You need a secure, compliant, and centrally managed platform, workplace communication platform, to help you to mitigate data, IP, and privacy risks, okay? On average, in Europe, data breaches average around $4 million for each breach. That's a very hefty punishment, right? A penalty for data breaches. And your solutions, of course, has to be instantaneous, right? It provides contextual, intuitive collaboration as well, so that you can drive productivity gains, right, in your company of more than 15%, okay? And lastly, right, it has to be a cloud-based, all right, scalable, and preferably no capex as well, so that you can achieve cost savings and efficiency. Now, let's say, right, in any communication solution, right, the human element can be the weakest link. Therefore, it's important that the organization starts now to educate your remote workers on the risk of using unofficial workplace communication tools. This is the first step an organization must take immediately in this COVID-19 pandemic environment. And this step can be taken right away. So with that, I will hand over to Sasha for our Q&A session. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Loy, for the presentation. So from this morning's sharing, we acknowledge that remote workplace communications can be challenging given the rise of data privacy and security issues faced by companies. Now it's time for all of you to raise your burning questions to our panelists, Mr. Dutch Ng, Mr. Loy Chi Ling, and Mr. Harsh Magin. Do drop us your questions in the Q&A box for us to have an engaging and fruitful discussion ahead. So let us begin with the first question from the Q&A box.
Hi, Shasha, thanks for that, right? I believe, Roy, I think you have shared a fair bit of this today. I also learned a fair bit of what is going on, knowing what WhatsApp is doing and what Signal and what these Telegram are doing, right? With the security, control, compliance, collaboration, with 3 of these requirements of OTT, UCaaS, and the secure messaging. I think this is what today's lesson, I think, believe that the audience right now are thinking through and render their thoughts for the question and Q&A. Okay, so now for these first questions coming from Thomas. He said, since that this is a cloud offering, right, Roy, as you mentioned in the last slide, where this NetSphere system is hosting. Okay. And its data as well, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Thomas, for asking these questions. But before I answer your questions, let me point a couple of things about cloud solutions, right? Cloud-based solutions. We have come a long way in using cloud-based services, right? Many services we are now using are on a SaaS model, and even governments around the world, including Singapore government, are now using cloud-based solutions and services. Therefore, there should not be a huge concern over the use of a cloud-based workplace communication provider. So your question is a very valid and very good question. Where are the data hosted? Where are the services hosted, right? So for NetSphere, it is actually hosted in Singapore, and the data is hosted in Singapore. So when choosing not only NetSphere, but any cloud-based workplace communication provider, right? There are a couple of questions, right? I think a company should be asking. Number one, like what Thomas was asking, right? Where is the communication server located? Number two, where are the data stored and how are they stored, right? Are they stored encrypted? Are they stored in the public cloud? Can they be stored in the on-prem or even in the private cloud as well? And so also very important is actually in the end-to-end encryption, as part of this questions we to ask for a cloud-based provider, does the provider actually decrypt the data and how do they use the data? Important questions to ask. And then of course, can they do a hybrid model where you can have your server, communication servers located in the cloud in Singapore or locally? But you know, my data, I want to be stored in my private cloud. Is it possible? Right, so these are important questions to be asked, right? And of course, lastly, right, when you go to a cloud provider, asking about where the data are stored, where are the servers are located, you should also be asking, is this solution complying with GDPR, HIPAA, ISO 27001, or the various requirements out there? So a long answer to your questions, Thomas, yes, it is stored in Singapore for NetSphere, and the data is also stored in Singapore. The service is also located in Singapore.
Okay, Thomas is safe. It's all in Singapore, and it's well that elaborated by Roy. It's all based on standards. That's why it's being installed. Okay, next question is Christopher. Okay, Christopher, I have a question. It said, since that when you start, right, Roy, you mentioned that everybody is working from home due to pandemic, right? And how secure is home Wi-Fi and usually shared by family members? Maybe you want to share a little bit on this area.
Okay. Maybe I will ask Harsh to answer this question from a perspective from US. Maybe we can have a better understanding since Harsh has been working from home as well in our Chicago our headquarters.
Yeah, so absolutely, like so the home. See, what has happened is that we have moved to an environment where we don't bring our devices to work anymore, right? We bring our home work environment to work, right? And your home work environment includes your personal devices or the company provided devices, and then you have to use your own Wi-Fi and internet, right? So so those and what it does to that is that that puts a pressure on the enterprise IT to manage more endpoints for security than they were managing before, right? So that has increased multiple fold. Now, is there a vulnerability there when that happens? Of course, right? The risk risk of working outside of your own firewall has has already increased, right? So that risk is there. Now, given that risk, it becomes even more important that you are using the platforms which are secured and end-to-end encrypted, and that's that's what kind of Lloyd covered in his presentation, and some of the key points he made was that when you have end-to-end encryption, you don't decrypt the data at rest. So even if your ports are vulnerable, even if somebody tries to hack into your data, right, a secure encrypted platform should hold its own and should be able to keep the data secure, right? So yes, I think my answer to the question really is that the security we manage in a platform like ours. We manage the we kind of are agnostic to the endpoint security. We manage the complete security at the platform level.
Thanks, Ash, for that. Yeah, it's secure in certain way of how we're going to use this platform. Next question, more on this business. I would say that it's a NetSphere solution, right? It's a similar to this Office 360. I believe people are using this Microsoft product widely. And really, how much is this subscription fee based on this NetSphere solution? Maybe this one I have to pass it to Roy.
Okay, so well, I think for NetSphere, we are definitely a SaaS model, right? And like many SaaS model, we provide our solutions on per end user basis per month, right? Now, so depending on the volumes, depending on the requirements, right, of the company. So we have different tiers of pricing for NetSphere as well. And I'm more than happy to discuss this, separately with the gentleman who asked the questions, right, on our pricing. Now, on Office 365, we certainly in many ways, our solution is similar, right, but there are differences as well, especially if we look into the encryption portion, how we do encryption, and how we are able to do hybrid model where your data can be stored in your private data. Okay, so these are things that we are different from 365 or Office 365 teams, right? I think that's what you're referring to. So I think the pricing model, we are SaaS model, so we provide what we call the monthly user fee, right? Then of course, on top of that, depending on how you want to deploy, whether you want to deploy in the full cloud model or hybrid model where your data is secure in your own private cloud or private on-prem, right? There's also a different packages for that as well. So I think that's what I can share right now, Dutch.
Thanks, Roy. I think Kimberly, probably you need to direct contact with NetSphere.
Yes, sorry, Kimberly, I forgot your name. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I believe I agree with you, Roy, because a certain tier level, certain number of users, I believe you price accordingly to different organization as what the needs of it, right? And different type of features as well. It's fair enough, fair enough. Kimberly, I think you can go offline with this Roy or Harsh on this pricing structure. Okay. Yes, this Paul Sate, right? Yes, the slide will be shared after the webinar, so you can just request for it. Thank you. Okay, I'm still waiting for some questions. I have another questions here that I may share a fair bit of this. This is attending to Roy. Yeah, Roy, how there are many secure messaging and collaboration applications out there in the market. What should a company consider when choosing such solution? I believe just now you shared about the 3 areas of the requirement, right? Probably you want to elaborate more on this area so that our audience is able to capture it more precisely.
Right. I've shared the consideration, the 4 considerations, which are security, control, compliance, and collaboration, right? So of course, I also shared the detailed requirements as like data collection, encryption as well. So these are important checklists, right, for companies to consider when selecting a secure messaging collaboration application. But I also want to add, which I did not cover during my presentation, is that the solution has to interface easily with your business application, right, through APIs. Many companies now, they want their business application to be connected to APIs as well, so that they can send critical business information to end users securely, right? I touched about it, but there's a whole lot of APIs, right? Different APIs out there in the market that that companies are using. So one area to look into is actually what is your business applications and how can NetSphere or any other workplace communication, right, tool can interface with my business application easily and deploy securely. Now, another consideration is actually whether your solution provider has a vision of what is next for workplace communication and collaboration. So they should be able to articulate, right, their roadmap clearly to the customers. So for example, we have come across customers asking, hey, I have chatbots. Do you have chatbots where I can actually put chatbots into your solution so that I can use it as for example, a customer support tool, right? So these are important roadmaps, features that should be in the discussion as well. And lastly, what I want to say is actually, when you choose your solution provider, you must make sure that they are financially viable, because we have seen customers coming to us because their platform providers, their previous platform providers, right, were taking over or went bankrupt. This space right now is really hot because of the remote working and because of the pandemic. And we are seeing a lot of startup companies coming into this space. So you certainly do not want to run into the risk of no support, right, if the company closes down. So the financial stability of the solution provider is also a very important consideration as well.
Yep, this also, thanks for these questions for this. And just on the high side, right, on this, it seems like you're talking about these, what are the solutions out there, and these, how to choose the right solutions, right? Can you just briefly share with us on, with this workspace communication solution, right? Will we evolve, what is the evolving of it in the next few years?
Harsh, you want to take this question since you are VP for product?
Yes. Yeah, Harsh, maybe you have on this sharing.
Yeah. So yeah. So I think the next 3 to 5 years, like next few years, what COVID-19 has done, right? It has done in terms of induced acceleration to digital and remote, so that has actually made. It's given us a very clear sight on what's going to happen in next 3 to 5 years, right? And and just to draw upon what Loy mentioned, and all the all the impact to the market and to the customers that Loy covered. The direction is clear, right? Mobile first and the messaging first platforms, right? Which are based on cloud-based infrastructure and a very flexible infrastructure that allows you to deploy on-prem, right, or on a private cloud, right? These platforms are going to become more dominant than the legacy platforms that exist today. People's preference of mobile messaging and voice and video on their smartphones, is also what is going to drive the platforms. And encryption and especially end-to-end encryption, right? If your platforms, if your communication platforms, you will see adoption of end-to-end encryption by the platforms which will survive after a few years, because a lot of the legacy platforms that we have today, and including, I will say, not just legacy, including a lot of the other collaboration platforms like Slack or Microsoft Teams, they cannot deliver end-to-end encryption today. And they are trying to accelerate and trying to do a catch-up, because that's where the the solutions are evolving, right? So messaging first, because messaging has become the most preferred environment for people to communicate, and including with voice and video. It's all done in the messaging first environment. And then, of course, like the 4 pillars or the 4 tenets that Lloyd talked about, what we should look at, those you will see becoming more and more dominant.
Yeah, I'll just add that, especially with improved 5G, right, and mobile broadband bandwidth, I think you will get better and better video calls and conference options, right? Possible in the future, workplace communication is not just to interact and exchange ideas, right? It may be a platform in the future for even training and development of your employees as well. So there's a lot of possibilities, but like Harsh said, and I fully agree, that number one, messaging is going to stay. Video and video calls and audio calls is going to improve tremendously. The quality of this is going to improve tremendously, and that will bring up a lot more a lot more use cases in the future. Okay.
Yeah, no, right. And in Hash, I think totally agree, right? Initially, when we had adopt some of the messaging apps that we have, We start to have a call, and then later probably have video, and start to have conferences coming in to interact with more and more people joining into this era. So I believe that this will stay for long, even in the next 10 years, I could say. With the 5G, maybe 6G is coming out, right? And getting faster, maybe virtual, all is coming along. Yep, yeah, I believe so. But next question from Thomas, right? I think he just want to let, because just now we talked about this Microsoft, right? Do we have any integration with other solution, for instance, of these like Microsoft Teams?
Okay, so we don't do integration with Microsoft Teams because I think one of the things is actually, as Harsh mentioned earlier, we are very focused on encryption end-to-end, right? And currently, I mean, if you look at what's happening in Microsoft Teams, right, they can't really provide end-to-end encryption. Now, the second thing is actually, why should we be integrating with Microsoft Teams? Because in many ways, we are competing, or we have overlap, what do you call it, overlap functionalities as well. But given our focus on encryption, our focus on enabling much better collaboration, right? Features in our platform, we do not intend to do any what do you call that, integration with Teams, like, or even Slack. But having said that, as I mentioned earlier, we are helping a lot of companies and hospitals as well in Europe, for example, where we actually integrated their medical applications or business applications, right, with NetSphere, so that they can send emergency broadcasts to many people. One of the things that we have launched recently is actually what we call the emergency broadcast, where if there's emergency situation in a company, right, management can send a broadcast message with a very distinct sound or alarm tone, and in a certain sense, we will take over the screen of your phone to tell you something is happening and you need to evacuate. And then you have to acknowledge on that screen, right, before you can remove the screen to go back to your normal home desktop. So I think we have different functionalities, different use cases, right, with Teams, and I think that's how we are evolving. And I think the other thing, maybe Harsh, you want to chime in as well, is that we are very focused on developing new features as well, and we work very closely with our customers to come up with new features, right? Where we feel that certain features or use cases are very good for the rest of the customers, we will actually put it in the roadmap and accelerate it for the rest of the customers as well. So when you work with companies like Team, that's not going to happen. Harsh, any thoughts, any comments?
Yeah, sure. I like to add that if you look at Microsoft Teams or even at Slack, like both are great solutions, right? They provide tremendous value to their users, and it's reflected in their adoption and valuation, right? But if you really look at what they do, Teams is just a collaboration hub, right, for Microsoft Office 365 applications. They are not a communication first platform, right? And the value that they deliver is to deliver a better experience for their Office 365 users so that they can collaborate and they can be more productive in the Office 365 environment. But it's not necessarily a communication platform, right? It may have some overlaps because of the use cases and how messaging has become so ubiquitous, right, in different platforms, like even gaming platforms, like when you see messaging applications. But that should not be confused with the communication platforms, right? And their roadmap, their feature functionality that they launch is very different, it solves a very different problem than what we do at at NetSphere. Our roadmap is geared towards enabling communication, right? And in terms of communications, we already talked a lot, covered a lot here. But we are truly a communication platform that allows collaboration, right, in a very secure, compliant manner, right? And we are not, and we are cross verticals, right? We are not there to solve the problem for a bunch of SaaS applications collaborating with each other. If you look at Slack, very similar business model, right? Slack is again just like Microsoft Teams. It's a hub for hundreds of SaaS applications that it integrates with, right? Especially in a DevOps environment, it brings tremendous value for those use cases. But again, it's not a mobile first or a messaging first platform, right? They were all built desktop first for communicating within their own ecosystem.
Yeah, I think Harsh and Roy, I think you spot on something that, on this area that I believe very important for this audience or those who need this platform, right? Is you look on the 4 area, consider 4 area of your security, of your control, compliance, and how you're going to collaborate. As some of the solution out there is more on the collaboration tool instead of the holistic approach that what you have mentioned. Fair enough. Now I think time is about 11. Probably I just want to have the speaker, maybe Roy and Harsh. Do you have any last to share before we need to really stop this? We have tons. We have a lot of questions right now, but due to time, right? Apologies. Probably we need to do another one for your version 2 or part 2. I think a lot of interest party right now. And maybe I just pass to Harsh first. Harsh, maybe you have any last thing to share to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say the writing is on the wall. Like, if you look at our own poll that we just conducted, right, it matches exactly with what Loy was presenting, that 85% of the people, right, in business today, even today, are still using consumer messaging applications, or the enterprises don't have a governance or a policy that mandates using platforms which are secure and can maintain the data and the privacy and all the enterprise grade requirements. So yeah, I mean, that's my comment. It's a real-time problem, and shows in the poll that it is real-time.
Right. So I just want to repeat what I say before I end my presentation earlier, is that the human element is the weakest link here, right? As shown from the poll, many of your workers are actually using consumer applications right now. So it's very important for the organization to start educating the remote workers, right, on the risk of using such unofficial communication tools. And this is the first step that has to be taken immediately, especially in this remote working environment. There shouldn't be any delay, right? Companies should start looking at, securing their workplace communication as soon as possible.
Thanks, Roy and Harsh, for this wonderful event here. I believe the audience, if you have any more questions or anything that you want to come by, get Roy and Harsh to answer those questions that you have in mind. And also looking for pricings, the tools, the solution, in-depth features and knowledge, right? Please approach them, and then they will give you a full answer and how you're going to structure in your business. And okay, so I wish you all have a healthy. Now Singapore is phase 3 heightened alert. Hopefully that it will ease out soon in the mid of July, so everybody can clutter and get face to face. I think it's much more important than this webinar. So keep safe, everybody. Good luck. Shasha, I pass it to you first.
Thank you, Dash. Thank you, Mr. Loy and Harsh. So I will be sharing screen for our feedback. So we have now come to the end of the webinar, and we would like to thank all the panelists for this insightful sharing this morning, and we would appreciate if you could scan the QR code on the screen to give us your feedback for today's session. So thank you, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe and enjoy.